Well, hello, it's the 21st of June and we're going to be picking some lovely cherries from my stellar cherry tree. First self-fertile variety of cherry to be introduced to the UK in the year 1968 from British Columbia in Canada. So I've owned this tree now for probably about, crikey, 13, 14 years, something like that. Had it planted at a previous address. Many of my long-term viewers have seen this tree before and indeed the harvests from it. I'll link a few videos in the description box below so you can have a further look at this tree and a bit of the history of it if you're interested. Anyway, let's pick some cherries. So as we go into the tree here, you can see I've actually got it planted in amongst yellow raspberry bushes. Canes, whatever you want to call them, variety Golden Queen. But this is the sort of thing you get. So you see them beautiful, lovely cherries there. Look here, it's a really good year for them this year. How are your cherries doing? If you've got any, let me know. In fact, let me know how your fruit is doing in general. But yeah, you could really see just a huge crop. And we don't seem to have too many pests this year. Not too many ants or anything like that, which is great. But anyway, let's pick. So, growing a cherry tree in a relatively small garden such as this, of course I use the term relatively because to people with no garden or a smaller garden, my garden here is quite big. But of course there are people with much, much bigger gardens than what I've got here. So this is grown on what's called a minaret rootstock, and traditionally the way a minaret would be grown is like a vertical cordon. So when many gardeners, fruit growers think of cordons, they think of fruit trees that are grown at an angle like that. But this is a vertical cordon, as you can see with the trunk here. And it's actually said that you can grow these minaret rootstock trees. You don't only get cherries like it, you can get apples, plums, pears, etc. grown on these rootstocks as well. They say you can actually grow them in containers, so that could be a good idea for people who are limited to just growing their fruit in containers. So quite interesting. If I remember correctly, I got this from one of two places. It was either Kenmure, which is sadly gone now, I think it's closed down. That was in Tendring here in Essex, and the other place I may have got it from was Pomona Fruits, which to my knowledge is still going. But what you want to make sure you do, there's a lot here I tell you, what you want to do before you commit yourself to the growing of fruit, you want to make sure that you try what you want to grow. So for example, I knew I wanted to grow a traditional cherry, so I went for Stella variety because of the historical importance of it into the UK and the fact that it's a very tried and tested variety. So there's a few there. So before self-fertile varieties were introduced, created, whatever term you want to use, bred, you'd actually have to have more than one tree to produce a crop of cherries, and quite often the trees were quite big. If you look into sort of a bit of history of cherry growing, you can often find the older orchards had rather large cherry trees in them in order to produce crops. So of course, beautiful trees, but rather large, hard for picking and relatively dangerous as well. You know, ladders, cherry pickers, etc, etc. Whereas with modern day rootstocks, etc, more modern day self-fertile varieties, you can actually have smaller trees and maybe don't need to have as many trees, etc, etc. So in order to produce a very sort of good pickable crop. So that's a very good thing really. Oh crikey, loads here. So it seems actually, from what I could see, this year here in the UK is a good year actually overall for fruit. Like I'm looking at plums over there, my peaches are doing really well. Grapes are looking absolutely abundant, but to be fair, grapes, as many of you who have followed me for a while probably aware, I tend to do well with grapes here year after year. They always generally do very, very well indeed. But this year, the cherries here are fantastic. Might even be the best year I've ever had. I have had good years off of this tree before. but I don't remember it being as good as this in the last few years. I think the year we had the lockdown, or one of the lockdowns, seems like a long time ago now, but we had a really good crop of this tree that year, if you remember. If you remember that, let me know, because many of you actually back in the day found my channel through videos such as cherry growing and peach growing here in the UK. Well, here we are. Look quite nice, didn't they? Oh yeah, lovely cherry flavour. And there's plenty more up there, easily this amount again. So anyway, here we are in the Polytunnel. So the old Dixie Red Peach really is doing well this year. So actually this tree here, last year, if I remember correctly, didn't give me much of a crop at all. Had a bit of a break, but to be honest, it was well earned because it's given me good crops year after year after year. I've owned this tree probably for 10 or so years ago, 10 or so years, something like that. I'll link a few videos in the description box, and once again you could see you know, a bit of the history of this tree from sort of when I had it as a, I think I've got an unboxing video on my channel somewhere. But anyway, yeah, lovely crop. These will get a bit bigger than this as well, but expecting good things from here. Yeah, so you can see just the amount there are. These will swell more than this, but yeah, very happy with handle down here as well. Very happy indeed. So just forgive this, I'm in the process of reorganising, so just ignore this, it's not normally here. But in the Polytunnel here, I've got another peach tree. So let's have a look at that. It's carrying a beautiful crop as well. Yeah, so as we approach it, let's have a look. Now, once again, the Polytunnel needs a lot of work. So anyway, just before we go in there, have a look here. So you can see all these grapes coming here. You can see just the huge crop that I'm going to have this year. It's genuinely going to be completely immense, this crop, but this is not a grape video, so we'll cover them in another video. Anyway, into the Polytunnel here. So this is peach variety Peregrine, an absolutely beautiful white flesh variety. So there we go, you can see just what I've got here. Huge crop being carried by this tree here. Absolutely fantastic. So yeah, really happy. You can see just how many there are here. These generally tend to be ready a little bit later, I think, than the Dixie Red, if I remember so correctly. So just whilst we're briefly on the subject, we'll have a little look at what we got here. Got some sunflowers here. I never planted these actually. These are just grown wild from some sunflowers I grew last year. Echinacea I've got growing here. Echinacea said to have some quite nice medicinal properties. Let me know if you know much about that. Apparently it can be used for the prevention of coughs and colds, but I'm not a herbalist by any stretch of the imagination, so make sure you do your own research in these regards. But yes, I've got peas growing here. Grew these from home saved seed. This is variety Champion of England, tall climbing pea. Well, these haven't grown too tall, probably because the soil here, I've been very busy with other things, so I've not you know, given the garden the love it truly deserves. As many of you probably can see, my garden doesn't, I'm not in the glory days of my garden at the moment. The glory days were a few years ago, but I've been doing other things, etc, so you can't do everything, but keeping a sort of gardening thing going on. So these peas, so peas are really good to grow, great fun. But yeah, these are nice, but these peas can get in good soil 6 to 8 feet tall, but unfortunately not going to happen here. But it doesn't mean that I can't still get a crop, does it? So there we are, a little bit of growing peaches and cherries and peaches, etc. Here in the UK, you can do it. You've seen me do it. Some of you may be asking why that am I growing my peach trees under cover in polytunnels when the trees are perfectly hardy here. Yes, they are perfectly hardy here, but you need to protect them from winter rainfall in order to prevent peach leaf curl. Many of you will be sick and tired of me going on about peach leaf curl because I've spoken about it for years, but you really don't want to get it. And the way that I prevent my trees getting it is by keeping them under cover year round. You could just cover them up during the winter months, etc, and uncover them when the summer comes, but that, to me, that's a nuisance, so I just grow them under cover year round. You get the idea. Don't get peach leaf curl, it's a complete nuisance. Well, we're on the 23rd of June, so a few days later, but I thought I'd show you some lovely cherries I've got growing here in containers. This might interest some of you who don't have room to grow cherries in the open ground, or maybe you want to grow them in a container for whatever reason. Maybe you're renting, you're going to be moving soon, or whatever reason you want to grow cherries in containers. Let's have a look at what I've got here. Okay, so once again, please excuse the rather rustic garden at the moment, but that's just how it happens to be. So I'm just navigating my way over here. So you can see I have cherries growing there on this Stella cherry, growing in what I believe is either a 25 or 30 litre container. So I was actually given this tree, I can't remember who by, but a company used one of my videos on their website and they gave me this tree to say thank you. So isn't that wonderful? So let's pick a couple of these cherries and we'll see just what these are like. They look absolutely beautiful, don't they? I'm amazed the pigeons actually haven't got these, but that's good. I think that's on a Colt rootstock, which is actually otherwise known as a half standard. Probably would end up quite a big tree if I planted that out in the ground. So I've actually got quite a little container orchard here. Look, you can see here, this is an apple tree variety, winter gem. Long time until they're ready. Got some figs here, look. See little figs there. Figs often do well in pots because they benefit from root restriction. Can actually force them into producing better crops than if they were in the ground. That's a subject for a different video though. Anyway, so here we go. Now, this is variety Sunburst. Now, these are actually a bit smaller than would be ideal. I'm afraid this is my fault. I just simply didn't give this tree the water that it needed. So if you're growing in containers, of course, you need to make sure you thoroughly water them because they're reliant upon yourself. This is probably over a 200 litre container. So yeah, little baby cherries. So make sure, give them the water they need. You also might want to consider feeding, mulching with manure maybe, during the winter months around the base if you're growing cherries in pots, in containers. You can get all sorts of other feeds as well, but manure is often good. Put it round a sort of November, December time and just leave it there, and over the winter it'll work in. That can be a good thing to do. High potassium feed maybe you could give them, maybe a tomato feed, something like that. But yeah, grow cherries in containers and pots as well. Thanks for your time, see you soon.